Greetings, greetings, greetings. You are now tuned into the vault. Trust Christian, know nothing, control everything. Just want to thank you for tuning in live or listening to replay. We always appreciate the live listeners, appreciate the listeners that listen in the replay to the entire episode. We have tons of people that contact the vault, thanking the vault for helping them out. We also get a ton of inquiries for consultations, and we always feel free and appreciate the contacting out and moving forward with consultations and trustee training. So just always appreciate you all that actually take the time to listen and take the time to come through and move forward as well with the vault. Today's episode is episode 143, How to Speak Trust. And so just thank you all for once again tuning into this particular episode. Today's Tuesday, so we're going to be going over some news in this episode as well. Has some interesting news actually. Uh, just to let you all know that so there's two things that we always have heard that are guarantees in life, and they're death and taxes. Well, some people they know how to set up their estate, their name, because that's who you are, your name, what company you build. And this episode is so quintessential to how to speak trust because it talks about the language. So just be prepared for a lot of language conversation. But your name is a thing that holds weight and it can outlive you. So when people talk about their name and not having a good name, you all can see that there's opportunities for that to grow beyond your living. So there is benefit. So in 2019, oh excuse me, in 2018, it was reported that Michael Jackson's estate earned over $400 million. Elvis Presley's estate earned over $40 million. Arnold Palmer is a golf player, one of the best players of. While he played, uh, he came up with a drink that combines iced tea and lemonade, and in turn, he made over $38 million. We want to start this episode out with great news. This is great news. So you can see that your estate can make this money after you die. So even though you're working right now and you're earning what you're earning now, what happens after you die? Bob Marley's estate made over $23 million last year. Dr. Seuss, a lot of people in the States, they know about Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss earned over $16 million last year. 4.8 million books were bought around the world. Prince made over $13 million last year. After his death, he made record sales of albums for 250,000. So when you all wonder, what is today worth to me? When people wonder, what is today worth to me? It's worth your family benefiting from your work for generations. We got new business from Amazon represents $1 billion opportunity. This was a great one to see this one here. Amazon plans to launch Project Kuiper, a network of 3,200 satellites to create an interconnected network that beams high-speed internet to anywhere on Earth. Morgan Stanley, a large investment bank, estimates the project represents as much as 100 billion with a B opportunity. The firm's estate on its expectation that the space economy will grow to more than a trillion over the next 20 years. So as you all can see, while you all are looking at Amazon, people are looking at Amazon, we should say, and they say, oh, Amazon is this huge company. They're already in space, ladies and gentlemen. They're looking to show where capital is being allocated. Capital is being allocated to satellites. Private companies are launching satellites now, have been for a very long time, and there are opportunities for you People say, well, if the jobs are leaving, where's the money? Right there. Morgan Stanley's giving the money to Amazon. They're not, Jeff Bezos is not taking from Amazon to build this company. Morgan Stanley is backing them. There's other institutions and people that are backing them. It's interesting that the President of the United States knocked cryptocurrencies this past week in the news, and the market changed a little bit, but one of the pioneers, or they're not even going to be considered a pioneer. They're doing what they do best. Facebook does what it does best. It comes in at this point. It's almost a holding company. They hold Instagram, one of the largest platforms, and they're going to hold one of the largest cryptocurrency networks. There's a few of them that can rival them that haven't gone public yet, but Facebook will be one of the larger social media networks that does that. The FTC approves $5 billion settlement over data privacy probe. So there was a $5 billion settlement from Facebook, and they're moving more and more into this space. There's relationships that are established with Facebook that we've seen that are with people that are very compliant with SEC rules, regulations, looking to show that they're compliant in that respect. So, a good one. Didn't really get a chance to read this article, but I knew this to say when I ran across it. A lot of people know who Robert Smith is. For Vista, he donated $40 million to uh, $40 million to Morehouse University, paying off student loans that students that were graduating they weren't going to have any student loans, and he paid a grant. It's really a grant, and it's an endowment. That's what we talk about here on the vault is an endowment. It's an endowment in the form of a grant that is to obviously pay for some people's debt. He came back with another smashing hit, raising $850 million. $850 million. That's close to a billion. Let's put a lot of emphasis there. Billions are still not easy feats, but he's making it look easy. Doubling down on his commitment to small software buyouts. He's raised, they're saying, over 16 billion with these deals in this space. And he has a fundraiser going on right now. See, when people talk about public fundraisers, a lot of people talk about crowdfunding. What do they say? They call it crowdfunding now. See, private on the private sector, you put together a real fund. On the public sector, you crowdfund. On the private sector, there's funds, phone calls that are made that are aimed to raise 10 million, 30 million privately. So, as you all can see, he's doubling down on these positions. You all can look at some of the funds. It's the Vista Foundation Fund or Vista the Third Foundation Fund. He has quite a few funds, ladies and gentlemen. The Vista's Endeavor Fund. He's heavily invested in STEMs, which are science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We definitely know his foundation is catered towards putting together those programs in the public for uh, for underprivileged youth. He definitely has those programs out in San Francisco and Oakland. So LG expands its blockchain ambitions with its food ledger and crypto trademark. So here we go. We got LG. What is LG known for, ladies and gentlemen? Appliances, electronic conglomerate. It's expanding its blockchain initiative. You don't need the government to share with you that it works. There are private companies allocating tons of capital to this environment right now, which is worthy of men and women's attention. When bigger capital is being allocated to specific industries and such a large conglomerate, they have a lot more money to lose and a lot more money not to waste. So definitely wanted to give out some good news this week. I think we got one more we're going to see. Uh, we're just going to go ahead into it. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead into it. So today's episode is 143, How to Speak Trust. A lot of people come to the vault and they ask this basic question outside of getting a consultation, outside of trustee training. Because usually they ask this question even in the consultation is, so what books or what private materials can they read to know how to speak trust? Uh, what private materials can they read? That is the question that the vault gets. What are the private materials you can read outside of the vault and the private materials? What are the materials that you can read? Alrighty. So we just want to make you all aware. There's only two ways to learn private information. That's through a mentor or through a private community. The vault is the private community of trustees. That's what's provided through the vault. It's private trustee training and an environment with other trustees. So, how do you speak trust? One of the main things that we learned and we talk about with mentors and trustees is understanding equity. Equity is obviously a position. It's a law. There's equity law, chancellery law, or chancery law, I should say, not chancellery, chancery law. And those are critical areas when people are dealing with assets, when people are saying that they have their house as an asset, their car is an asset, whatever is an asset that they have, whether it be diamonds, pearls, collectible art, anything. If a piece of clothing, if something is considered to be an asset, it's considered to be equity. And so, very, very important to understand that there's what's the jurisdiction? We're in an equitable jurisdiction. Not all jurisdictions are equitable jurisdictions. So the first thing we establish is understanding that how do you speak trust? Well, you have to know, well, what jurisdiction is a trust even talked about? What is it administered in? It's administered in an equitable position. So equitable jurisdiction. And so we get into uh, public versus private education. Usage of the language. The usage of the language is either possessive, I have, my, trust, though that possessive style language, or it's I'm a trustee. And then you can put whatever you want after that, but it starts with that. And it ends with that, even with your signature. It ends with that. It's knowing how to speak trust is obviously knowing how to read trust and knowing how to write trust. So how do you learn how to speak it? How to speak trust is by investing in your private education. How do you invest in a private education? You have to learn the language. How do you learn the language? By getting a dictionary, by getting a Black's Law dictionary. These are considered private books. Why is law and finance not taught in a public school? This is specifically public school. It's not taught because it's private education. Law is private, uh, and even though they do have public law, it's private because it's not taught in public school. It what's the other one? Uh, and finance is not taught in public school. People say it is, but they have finance degrees like they have other degrees that are not taught in public school. They're not taught in public school because that's an endowment through the Rockefeller Foundation of the Board of Education. So it's the dictionaries. These are the private books. It's interesting because when you get into the private environment, we talked about you learn from the mentor or you learn it from the private community. What's interesting is you get into a private community. You have to. And sometimes we have experienced investors, experienced entrepreneurs that say, "Okay, I'm in a private. Where do I go?" They actually come and say, "Okay," because this is the language they use. They say, "I have a trust." That means they've been given a trust. It's public. That's public. They don't come and say, "I'm a trustee of a trust," and I'm looking to get some continued education in the private sector because that's what it is. It's continuing education. In the private sector, you're continuing your education just like any public sector, uh, you know, position would continue their education. And so, one of the ways that people can get around more private investors and successful people is investing in private conferences. There are private wealth forums. There are private wealth conferences. A lot of times, we get a lot of the vault listeners that say, I wasn't born into wealth, so, I don't know where to go to associate with these people. You go to the private wealth conferences, you Google them like you Google everything else. You Google private wealth conferences. You see that the private wealth conferences are, $800, $500. Okay, $300. You go learn about capital raising. The people say there's two types of people. The ones that are willing to pay and invest in the private education, and then the other ones that sit there and they're going to say, well, how is it that because I don't make a certain amount of money, I'm not privy to a certain financial information? Remember, the public education gave everybody the same education. The private education says you invested in your education. That means that there's private information, there's proprietary patents and trademarks and all these things that people want to protect. They're private. Intellectual property, real estate, all those things, they're private. The way you get around them is through private conferences. We have private workshops at the Vault. They're traditionally for trustees. That's what you get when you're in trustee training. How do you speak trust? How to speak trust is you learn how to speak the language. Once you speak the language through the dictionary, we were going to do some stuff a while ago with the dictionary and bringing out some very important content about the dictionary. But there's various dictionaries. People say, well, what dictionary should I get? The Black's Law Dictionary, the same dictionary that the lawyer that you're into is using for definitions and reference. The same dictionary, Black's Law, BLACKS, Law Dictionary. You can get a gambit of the versions. There's over 10 editions. But once you familiarize yourself with the language, you familiarize yourself with the acronyms, because when you walk into these private conferences, ladies and gentlemen, it's nothing but acronyms. GPs, LPs, LLCs. When you hear the term LLC, people say, oh, it's an LLC. Well, okay, if it's an LLC, what is that for? Limited liability corporation? No. Limited liability company? You're not sure, or you may be sure. Well, we're saying in the spaces of private equity, there's acronyms, M&A. There's so many different JVs. These are terms that they use, and there's no hesitation on them explaining it. There is no need to explain it. You either know it in the private environment or you don't. So when you get into private conferences, from experience, there's a lot of terms that are thrown around that if you're not familiar with those PLLCs, if you're not familiar with those terms, you can definitely feel very left out. ICOs. Right now they're talking about ICOs. Sometimes they might even talk about IPOs. Traditionally in private equity, private wealth conferences, you're traditionally seeing a lot of private conversation, not talking about going public. They're private investment, maybe talking about it. They don't talk about investment and even mentioning that they're going to invest in a company IPO. They just say GPLP. That's the language. So when you even hear me even say me, that's not a good term, possessive. But when you hear the voice say PE, that's private equity. And so knowing the language really puts a person in a position where they don't feel that's the foundation. The foundation is the language. And the trustee training gives you those words. It gives you those cases. When you read over those cases, you can see, oh wow, these are the words that I do understand or I don't. There are people that say they don't understand something. Well, the reason why you don't comprehend it is because you don't know what you're reading. And it's not because the word is spelled incorrectly. It's because the word that you're traditionally used to seeing it in, the sense, the context in which it's traditionally seen in, is a different context in law. When you get the Black's Law Dictionary, you'll see that one word may have a completely definition. The word deem is not the same in the public as the private. The word compel is not the same in the public as the private. When we even speak of trust in the public, there's a different sense of when someone says, who do you trust? And then who are you in trust with? There's a difference because people in the private understand that trust is private, not just public. so they can speak trust. So very important to know how trust is taught. Another good resource is the law library. A lot of people uh, come to the vault and they say, once again, how can we get around more people that know the private sector, which aren't going to be many, ladies and gentlemen. It's a small group of people for a reason. They've taken the time to invest in the private in the law libraries, which every county in the United States has a law library. They all have law libraries. They all have resource classes inside of there. You see classes to take. Lawyers take classes at the law library, which classes are continuing education classes. So you might get a class for a trademark class. They're explaining certain things about trademark. Recently, we got one that came up about the community development entities that are for distressed areas, areas that are to be gentrified. There is a ton of capital that's being allocated, tax breaks that are being allocated to people considered now. You're considered to be creating sustainable housing, creating sustainable. They're calling it sustainable. The government has a subsidy. They have the tax breaks. They have all these things, and these are things that you learn by going to the law library and just going in and checking up and seeing on their calendar when these classes are held. Continuing education classes are held. Traditionally, most of the classes are free. We may have seen some that may cost, but have never really seen that. There are things that do cost at the law library, but for the most part, there are continuing education classes, like we talked about, contract classes that you can go to learn specific things. And the law librarians are always really, really good. Of course, everybody's experience is going to be different, so don't be upset if you have some different experience, but it's at the county level. You can go over to the next county and go to the law library if necessary. If you don't like your local law library, it's always room for growth. So, uh, one of the things that you really do learn how to speak in the or what's interesting is even before the trustees, most trustees really get going in trustee training, they're already talking about what their intention and their plan is. And that's one of the best things that we ask in the consultation is what is your intention? What is your purpose for being at the vault? And there's so many trustees that come with a resounding that truly enroll, that truly take it serious. It's all about family. They're traditionally the ones that are more successful are the ones that are willing to make the greatest sacrifices because they're the sacrificial lamb for the legacy. You hear a lot of the trustees talk about legacy. They talk about succession. Succession is a big thought process. It's a long-term thought process. It goes multiple generations, and once you get into multi-generational uh, thought process, it really does have a language to it because there's so many people that are saying, "Oh, I'm living day to day," or "Oh, I can barely get past this next paycheck," or "Oh, I'm $60,000 in debt, in bad debt," "Oh, I'm $100,000 in bad debt," "Oh, my house is foreclosed." There's a population out there that's what's going on, and so when we talk about the wealth that you're going to be holding on to, when we talk about how to speak trust, that's it. It's generational conversation. It's succession conversation in the room while the children are there. Possibly if they're not there, they're still being talked about. The level of conversation is a lot more visionary, long term thought process. And so we really talk about how when you go look up what they say, what do you look up in trust? I mean, as far as the dictionary, you look up the words that you value the most. You look up your values. You go look up words that you might question. That's the best part about having it sitting at the dinner table, is that when you are finally sitting there, you're eating dinner, you can just scroll through and look at different definitions. You can see that trust has different is over 40 different trust definitions in a dictionary. You can see that there's many different types of laws. You can see the different types of laws. If you've never been familiar with the laws, you can see that there's different type of laws. So you get very familiar with the language that is really the law that's governing the business language, and is in the legal language. It was called legalese, and so it's just really, really awesome to see and have that level of conversation with others when you are able to acquire that information. So I thank you all for tuning in live or listening to the replay. You guys see may have some things in the chat. Alrighty. Someone said, how do you set up a trust? You can go find it out in the law library. Go get a trusted source. You can listen to the vault all you want. That's like asking a lawyer. How many lawyers have you called in the past week to ask that question? They're the ones that traditionally write trust and wills. We were going to do an episode on trust and wills, and just there's no need to. There's no comparison. People try to say, oh, well, uh, we wanted to do an episode about why you never see a Rolls Royce commercial. You're not going to see Rolls Royce commercials because the people that need to know about a Rolls Royce, they know where to go get a Rolls Royce. The ones that don't, they'll never need to know about it. They don't need a commercial. The people that can afford a $300,000 car, a $400,000 car, they don't need to be sold. They already know. So when families want to reach out and say, okay, I just came across this information, where do I go? A lot of people, you're going to go to the public source. That's fair. This is a private resource. It's the vault. That's why it's own nothing, control everything. So in a private environment, there's there's investment. Whereas in the public environment, you can call a public lawyer and get an hour free and ask them questions because they're traditionally going to give you free time. This is the free time for the vault. This is to give back to society. This is to expand what's considered to be private communities. There are private communities operating around you all the time. Private equity conferences are happening all the time. Private equity has not taken a hit ever. People may say, oh, the hedge fund environment got reallocated. We saw a lot of hedge funds go after 2008. Okay. There, there, there's still hedge funds popping up right now. When people pop up after 2008 and say, yeah, we popped up 2012 and we raised over $50 million from 2012 to 2018 in their private fund, private funds are still growing. It's the public sector that public people look at and they don't know how to speak trust because the private sector is trust. They do have obviously trust in public, but that's the private sector. Pensions, these trust funds, Social Security fund. So appreciate you all for tuning in live or listening to replay. Thank you all for being in the chat. Feel free to contact us, Christian at Trust Christian Enrollment for Trustee Training. You all can at least find out what the rate is and things of that nature. We'll make sure that you get the details so you can find out the details in the training. It is a 12-week course, and we go over the details in the actual email. So if you want to even find out about it, feel free to email us Christian at trustchristian.com or go to welcometothevault.com. Feel free to, and we look forward to hearing from you and moving forward with our trustee training. It's going to be a blast, and I look forward to it. If there's no questions, you all can enjoy the rest of your day. Peace and blessings.